Hi there, welcome to another episode of Harrison Hobbies. Today we are going to be looking at Generac's GP2200i inverter generator. So this one here specifically is model 7117. So this generator here is going to give us around 2200 watts peak, which would be our starting current, and then it will give us a sustained run of 1700 watts. So the Generac 2200i, this is going to be a white label unit from Generac. And so what that means is that Generac has probably signed a contract with some overseas manufacturer. They already had these designed. Generac said, hey, I like the way that looks, let's do that. This is no different than the other, right? This is the smaller brother of this unit here. Based on some of the design cues here, the shapes and stuff that are utilized between both, it looks like both of these are coming out of the same factory. They're probably done by the same design house. And so this is for reference, this is the 1200i, which gives you 1000 watts sustained. This one is not parallel capable. However, some of the white labels that have purchased this have purchased that option. I think I know it's here, they make a version of this also, the Duramax. I think the Duramax version of this one does offer parallel capability. But that's neither here nor there, since this is not necessarily a review of this generator here, but I wanted to bring it up onto the table here so you could see a rough size comparison. This one here, certainly a lot lighter than this one, but this one's going to have, it's going to have a bigger alternator, it's going to have a bigger engine, it's going to have a bigger fuel tank. Everything's just a little bit bigger with this. The other piece of that is the vendor that is building these is selling to a lot of brands. Specifically, some that I've found are, the Pulsar GP1200 BIS, Craftsman makes one, Westinghouse makes one, and as I mentioned, Duramax also makes one. So it's basically every vendor gets to choose what color of injection molded plastic they want to use, and then they get to choose some of the feature set here, right? Some of like the Craftsman, it's super value engineered, and so it doesn't give you any waterproof covers. This one does have the waterproof covers. It's got the start-stop here, just like all of them do. I don't know if they have cigarette lighters or not. I didn't honestly look that closely, and some of them have parallel capability. Again, some don't. So I guess just walking into this video, this one here was around $570 whenever I bought it. And I think you can find that on Amazon now for about that price. But, and this one here typically retails at about $350. And so, this one is basically double the wattage of this. Not quite, but, close enough. But if you're in that, $350 range, you don't really want to spend almost double that at $570. You've got, I guess the cheapest on here that I'm seeing right now is the Westinghouse iGen 2200, which is, $450, so it's $100 more than this, so, around 25% more. But you get all the features here for under, $100. So as you're watching this video and you're looking, this isn't necessarily specific to the Generac. Granted, some of the feature set is, but one note on that is I'm not sure parallel kit capability. I said that weird, but the parallel kit capability here it's got two little ports. Again, we'll look at that whenever we do the walk around. That might not be applicable. I assume that they're all using the same brain box as well. Lots of them use the two banana plug styles that go into there. So even if you already have a generator you need to upgrade, it may be worth a shot to see if, do a little bit of research and figure out if your existing equipment may even work with your new generator. But let's put this aside. And we'll go through the game plan for this video. So I guess once we dive in here, we'll take a closer look at the front panel. We will pull off the side panel. We'll check out the engine bay. We'll look at the carburetor. We'll look at axis in general. And we'll walk around the other side. And then we'll add some fuel, add some oil, start it up. And then we'll do our standard gauntlet, our waveform test, voltage test, frequency test under different wattage settings, and we'll try that in both eco mode and non-eco mode, so we can understand the benefit that you'd get if you want it basically running at full throttle all the time. So let's dive in. So your front panel here is probably going to look like pretty much every inverter generator that we've reviewed here. It's got some bells and whistles that others might not, but your first is going to be your plastic knob here. So it's a 3 setting. You're going to have normally you'd be here in the off position whenever you want it to run. You'd turn it to choke. You give it a couple of pulls, and then you'd turn it into run, and then you'd let it sit there. One thing I'll note is this has very soft attents, right? It's very squishy, and it actually requires quite a bit of finesse to, you gotta kind of feel for when it drops into one of the I guess, detents for either choke or run. And so the problem with that's going to be if you're kind of hasty with this, or if it's vibrating a lot, try to put it into run, you may miss that. You may leave it a little bit in choke, which would probably leave that choke open a little bit, and then you'd start running lean, right? It's going to, or I guess you'd run rich, right? Because choke drops the air volume going into the engine, so that potentially could lead to carbon buildup. You know, the downfall of carbon buildup, it gets onto your valves. Eventually it becomes a big enough chunk, it'll fall off your valves, it'll drop down into your piston bay, and then, you know, it'll get ground up against the sidewall, cause lots of friction, destroy your engine. Is that going to happen if it's, you know, a couple of degrees off? Probably not, but, you know, you're not going to get the optimal power especially. And then, much like all the others, you still got the off. This doesn't give you the option, much like any other generator that we've looked at here that's an inverter style, to run the carb dry. So the second that you put it into the off, it's going to ground out your spark plug. It'll turn itself off immediately. Whatever fuel is still in your carb is going to sit there unless you manually dump it. The way you can get around that, not having to remove the side panel, would be dumping the gas and then allowing it to be in the run position until it runs all the way out of gas, and then it'll shut itself off and everything should be dry. Other lights and functionality here. So we don't have any like panel lights here to shine like the Briggs & Stratton did. So you've got your low oil light here. So that'll typically light up red if you're, you know, low on oil. So this will indicate that you are overloading the generator and it's going to be dropping its power. It's basically an indicator. Typically, if it's kind of on that brink trying to catch up, it'll start blinking, and then if it's failing, it'll just stay solid on there. And then if it actually trips itself, it's unable to recover, then it'll stay off, or it'll stay on. And your last light here is going to be the engine run light. So as long as everything's operating well, this light will be on. It's green. That'll just indicate that everything's working. Here you also are going to have a 12-volt lighter socket. So if you need a phone charger or, I don't know, whatever else you can run off a 12-volt there, you have that option. Then this is going to be your 8-amp 12-volt DC, so you're going to be at around 100 watts output capability there, right? It's 12 volts times 8 amps will give you your watts. You have your economy on and off switch. So one thing to note here is it's very, very easy to press. That's a kind of a nice feature. Sometimes whenever you have these little rubber boots on top of the switch, they get really cumbersome, so that's actually pretty nice. You have your 15-amp AC reset, and then you have your ground stud here. So your 15-amp AC is going to go to these two outlets. These are not tamper resistant or anything, so don't let your kids come out here and start playing with a fork around this. They are keyed for 20 amps, so you shouldn't probably be running 20 amp on these, but I guess theoretically you could, and if you had some weird 20 amp plug with the sideways blade on it, that'll fit into there just fine. And then it's nice enough weatherproof. I think this is identical to the smaller Generac that we'd reviewed earlier. And then as we talked about, you've got your grounding stake connection here. If you're operating this, especially if you're going to be in, you know, a damp environment or something, it's good to get that staked in, right? Just a cable from here to a long metal rod that goes in the ground, like a piece of rebar or something. So you end up with a path to ground for your circular bottom pin there. In addition, you also have your two parallel ports here. So this will allow you to hook up two of these generators in parallel, and then you've got a USB port, as I state. And so this is just a single one. As I state in pretty much every video, I'm not totally sure why you would want a USB port on this, right? Typically, you need a generator in a construction environment where I don't know that I'd want my phone sitting on the ground next to this, or you're recovering from a storm, it's rainy, it's, there's stuff blowing around. I don't know that I'd want USB electronics out there, but I don't know. I mean, I'm sure somebody used it enough that they add that here. It just seems like an interesting thing to spend money on for a vendor and ultimately for a user. Let's keep walking around. So here we're going to have the pull start. So this is nice here because they actually have riveted in a metal shroud. So hopefully you'll be able to see that. So as you're pulling here, you're probably not going to be hitting this. If you're pulling straight on, this is a harder plastic that seems like it's adhered in. And then the cord looks like they've upgraded to a braided nylon. We'll pull up the old Generac real quick here. And we can kind of see what happens when you don't have those considerations. So if we look here, you end up with hard plastic here. It is starting to get a little bit polished there. This one isn't too bad because, again, it's really hard to get there. The fact that you kind of have that protrusion there keeps the cord away. But these cords on these, to be honest, I'm not sure why they haven't been recalled. You can see how fuzzy that is. This cord is just completely disintegrating. And so it hasn't affected it yet, but at some point I'm sure that will. So if you're looking at this unit specifically, make sure that you have a new cord kind of in your budget there, because you'll need it. Moving around back here, we have a nice little spark arrestor here. It's going to prevent things, carbon and stuff that's hot, from spewing out the back. And then big vent here, nothing major to speak about. And then this side should be all of our oil. So we'll dive into here in just a minute. In addition to the generator, one thing that Generac has always done pretty well is keep you furnished, right? Even my oldest Generac, the GP2200i, I think, came with similar suite. But they give you a little vinyl bag here, and then in that bag is going to be two pieces. So you're going to have your spark plug removal tool here. So that's really nice. Gives you a little bit of a T-handle there, so you can get in and adjust, pull out your spark plug. And you also get yourself a Phillips and flathead screwdriver combo. So I'm not aware of any other generator brand that comes with this little assortment kit. Again, you know, this is probably going to cost Generac maybe $2 even. I would bet probably less than $2 to include with their kit. But it's just one of those things that, you know, now it's ready to go. But now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's get zoomed in on the side panel. We'll pull it up and then we'll look and get some oil added. Okay. So now we're to the side panel here. So we will use the included screwdriver to remove 4 Phillips screws. Now as I'm opening this, they feel as if they are captured. So if that's true, that's going to be nice, because it will probably cam this out. Oh, looks like maybe we only have 2 screws to do. Is it hinged on the bottom? Yeah, we're still camming this out. There we go. Okay. Let's pull that and see if we can pop this from within. There we go. Okay, so if we look down in here, it's pretty deep in there, but you can see that we have our spark plug. It looks like it's going to be pretty easy to access. And then we have this here. So oddly enough, yes, the fasteners are captured here. Hopefully we can see that, but there's a little E-clip that's retaining these 2 fasteners. We have some studs and we have grommets around here. It seemed a little bit odd on here actually that that these screws they're not long enough. They don't have enough grip there to actually pull the cover off. So if you do that, you will probably have to pull your spark plug cover here off, reach in with your fingers, and then push the panel as I just did. But now that we're in here, you can see interesting layout for sure. So we can see that a little more head on. So you can see your entire inverter panel here, huge capacitor. You can see a lot of your electronics are here exposed. That's the first time I've seen that. It's interesting. I don't know that it's necessarily bad. You know, it's all potted with, you know, a resin, so I wouldn't be worried about electrocution or anything here, but it's just kind of odd that it's so exposed. But here is going to be your air filter. And then here's your carburetor. Your carburetor, again, on all of the Generacs I've seen, I know they're not really Generacs, but you know, on all the units I've seen that Generacs had their name on, the carb's been really easy to access. And then this is probably going to be your choke here. So, yep, so we can see that. So it's kind of cool that you have a fastener right here, and then you can see your braided choke cable here. And so should you require to tighten that, if it, you know, gets stretched out over time, I wouldn't expect it to get stretched out, but in the event it does, you have full access there. Your drain, So this looks probably like a manufacturing defect, I would assume. So this right here is going to be your fuel drain. Maybe that's not. Maybe it's supposed to be like that. It's interesting because I don't feel any penetrations down on the bottom here that are large enough to accommodate that. So I guess their thinking is you leave it in there normally, and then whenever it's time to winterize, you're going to pull this little tube out here, let it kind of dangle onto the ground, and then you'll take your screwdriver and then back this screw out here on your carb bowl. And so that'll allow you to dump all the fuel that's in there so you can winterize better. The downside here, this is probably another one I'm not a huge fan of, is you just have this tiny little trough right here. You're potentially going to have a lot of oil that's going to kind of double back, meniscus down, and then drip into your base. Your base does have a couple of drain holes on the bottom that I'm looking at here. So hopefully you can see this here, but you got a metal base here, and you got some tiny little holes in the base there that are going to be able to accept some of that oil. Lastly, you got foam shrouding pretty much all over here. One thing I don't think we touched on briefly was, again, plastic quality feels fine. I don't have any major complaints about this. The fact that you got a little bit of foam in here to attenuate some of the sound that looks like it pretty much follows the contour here, that's nice. Little attentions to detail like this are actually cool, right? You got this support column right here, and then the foam actually necks down here in the middle. And so what that does is, that interfaces directly here, and instead of using the same thickness of foam here, and then potentially have that rubbing and tearing at the foam, and then eventually it all peels off, that should add a little bit of a buffer there and right size the fit. So that's good to see. So I guess now that we've got this open, let's put in the oil. We've got 0.35 quart, so 0.4 liter. So we need 0.35, assuming that there's no oil left in here from testing. So we're not going to put in quite the whole bottle. We'll stop it right there. And then this is a dipstick instead of just going to the bottom of the threads. You can see the hatch marks here. So what we'll do is whenever we put this in, we'll just place this right here at the very opening. We won't screw it in or anything. And then that'll give us an accurate reading. So let's put in our, I guess, Briggs & Stratton funnel here, but same thing. Crack the bottle of oil. So that feels like we may be close. Again, these things are typically tested in the factory before they come, and so through the testing there's always a little bit of residual oil. It's really kind of luck of the draw on how much you're going to have left in your unit and how overfilled it's actually going to be. We didn't manage to get any spilt. Now, one final test. Okay, so now we're about halfway up the dipstick. I think that's going to be just fine for our purposes. We'll get that screwed back in. Just wipe some of the oil away. Tuck that tube back inside. We'll take our panel and put it in. So again, you have these little feet here that interface here, here, and here. Those are going to slip into these 3 holes. There we go. Okay. So we've now got the side panel on. And as we prepare to fuel the unit here, I just wanted to point out the fact that, if we look in here, you got a nice fuel filter here that goes in. So that'll stop any particulate matter. It just drops in. And then we have the fuel cap here with your vacuum release on and off. So I guess in storage and stuff, you're going to keep the unit in the off position, and then whenever you're about to start your unit, you turn it on. Whenever you're going to shut the unit down, you're going to stop the unit down here, and then you'll return this back to the off. And then whenever you're ready to start the unit, you'll kind of do you can't push down on it, you kind of just have to lift a little and then rotate. Got a couple of glugs on this for fuel. So I guess the first thing that we'll do is we'll put it in the choke position, leave the tab on the on position. We will put the power into economy mode off. Very easy to pull. Wow, okay. So now it's in run. And and we'll turn it into economy mode on. Okay, this is actually, I would say that this is quite a bit quieter than the Briggs & Stratton. Even, I would say it's probably in the same range in terms of output. But, we'll get close to the camera. The camera's probably going to be about 6 or 7 feet away. And now, we're talking right here at the camera, and it's certainly quieter. And for today, we'll use the same standard heater, the Tenergy, that does our peak of 1500 watts. So we've got our frequency of 60 hertz, so we got that locked in. That's great. We're running a VRMS of 123. That's great. Our duty cycle is somewhere in the neighborhood of 49, 50, 51%, so we're pretty good there. We're very even. We're looking at the waveform. It's nice. We can see quite a few little chops. I would argue that it's probably right in the realm of perfect there. So in light of that, let's start the heater in its fan-only mode. So here we're running around 23, 24 watts. We'll turn this off and start it again so we can look at another blip. I guess looking right here, we haven't changed our VRMS at all. Our frequency is the same, duty cycle's the same, and yeah, there's no change here. Okay, so now we're going to drop it up to the low setting. So it took a little while to react, but it was pretty quick. And here we're running 1,000 watts trying to catch up. We are running 115, 119 volts, 60 hertz. Everything's good there. Go to our medium setting. So 116, frequency was there, duty cycle looks good. And then our highest, which will probably exceed, but oh, we are on the highest, okay. So then we'll go back one, drop it down, and zero it out, and then off. So now we'll just floor it right now. So it took a little while to recover, nothing major there. 102 volts, it actually recovers pretty well for a generator that size. And I'm looking at it, it's got a little bit of the orange light turning on whenever it's doing that. It's nothing major. Okay, so now let's put it into its sustain mode here. Okay, so now we got the motor kicked up. Now we'll go into low. Didn't sense anything there. Medium, it took a little while. Floored. $120.83. So even in the non-eco mode, it's taking quite a bit longer than I would expect, right? And honestly, in the non-eco mode, I would expect the engine to sound a little bit more like this, even at no load, right? At a higher RPM. So the way that the inverter generator works is as we apply more load here, the engine has to spin faster to generate more current to power it. And so whenever you have it in eco mode, it drops the RPM down, and so your alternator's only making a little bit of power. And then whenever you apply a load, it spins the engine up fast, and so kind of that lag in voltage is the motor's trying to kind of catch its breath there as it's continuing to increase. So by keeping the economy mode in its, I guess in its off position, its highest power setting, that motor's ready to go. Kind of, it's at the start line running versus kind of sitting on the bleachers and then having to get up to the start line to even go. So let's take one more now that it's ran steady state for a second. We're just going to floor it. That's high again. Okay. Well, I think we probably have enough data here that we're where we need to be. Okay, so we got the unit back onto the bench here. As we talked about, to shut it off, we're going to put it into the off position. We're going to let it die off. And then we'll take this from on. We'll pull up a little bit on it so we can handle the detent, and then turn that into off. And that is that. So final report out time. The highlights of this generator are going to be, I would argue, its cost, right? At $500-ish, it's going to be in, kind of middle of the pack. It's going to be more toward, I guess, really it is right in the middle of the pack. You're going to have your Hondas in this range that are going to be around $1,200, and you have some of the more budget options that are around $450. While this review was specifically of this Generac 2200 watt generator, this review is applicable to probably 10 other models out there from, as we mentioned before, Westinghouse, Craftsman, Duramax, Pulsar, and I'm sure that I think Harbor Freight makes one based off of this. There are plenty of others. So, this review is pretty much agnostic of this, except for, some of the stuff that we saw on the front panel. But overall, it's going to be quiet, right? This is probably going to be a lot quieter than some of the other, generators in this class. It's certainly going to be quieter than its conventional, genset head conventional generators. But even under load, I would say that this probably ranks middle of the pack on volume. But one thing I'll note on here is the frequency of the engine here is a little bit lower than, for example, the Briggs & Stratton or the Champion. So even under heavy load, that sound is, pleasant's not the right word, but it's certainly a little more bearable than fully wrapped out, Briggs & Stratton Champions. And again, I don't have a lot of experience with Hondas. That'll probably be the future segments of this channel. But regardless, yeah, I mean, it certainly sounds better at full throttle. I was a little bit disappointed with the eco mode there. The fact that eco mode didn't really bring us up to that max RPM. It sounded like we were, around 10 or 15% of our RPM at low, and then whenever we turned eco off, we were around 50%. There's still quite a bit of headroom, so whenever we applied a heavy load, even with eco off, it took a while for it to catch up. So just know that if you're running into that kind of scenario, and you're running something heavy like a table saw, if you're on a job site or repairing your house remotely, that is probably going to be rough on your equipment. The fact that it didn't budge from 60 hertz is a great advantage, and so certainly that's a lot nicer. It's much more kind on the motors. The voltage was only dropping into maybe the 80 volts or so that's going to be I guess a little less abusive on your equipment, even under full load. So, and at higher, less load, your power's perfect here, right? You're running right around 120 volts. You're right at 60 hertz. And the sine wave was great. And even under load, we didn't see flicker in the sine wave, right? So it still had the same shape regardless. So overall, I would say for the money, the ability to parallel, the noise level of this and its overall output, this is certainly what I would consider a good buy. So if I had to, answer would I recommend this to a friend, I would say absolutely. I think that there's probably worse you could do. One thing we do have to worry about though with this is the fact that because this is contract, this is a white label, Generac's just sticking their logos on, anyone can order these, get their own names, is going to be part availability. The opportunity to get this repaired is probably going to be a bit of a challenge, especially if Generac does sever ties with their white label manufacturer of these. Lastly, I've been burnt with this. My first generator was a Generac, and I blew up the control board on it. Call around and verify that whenever they say there is a service center in your area, that there actually is. Whenever I tried to get mine repaired, granted this was 10 years ago, probably maybe even more, there were none, right? Like the closest one to me was like 3 hours drive away. And so, even though on their website there were probably 6 or 7 right almost within walking distance of my house. So there's certainly, a lot of things to consider with a generator. This is perfect if you're intermittently losing power. I doubt that this has the longevity of something like a Honda. And again, at this price point, you probably shouldn't expect that. So overall, it's a good generator for the money, and you should certainly see if there's any other things in your price range that are similar to this, if this is the model you're set on. And I guess one last thing before we close out here is please make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, click the bell icon so you can be notified. We've got lots more generators in the hopper to review here. I want to get probably as many in the library as we can under some standard, albeit Sam's interpretation of quality analytics here. But we can at least compare head-to-head, and then anecdotally we can kind of discuss the pros and cons. So, thanks for watching, and check back soon for more videos.